Whether or not you can claim a player's success after he transfers from your school is one of my favorite newer college sports debates. Travis Hunter weighs in, and Jackson State plays a part. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode, we'll wrap up with a look at the new head coach for Lane College, Stanley Connor, and his path to returning to being a head football coach. In segment 2, we'll take a look at Southern's victory over Alabama A&M in women's basketball and how that impacts the top quartet of the most competitive in HBCU basketball. But I want to kick this off with one of my favorite sports debates. I think that this is something that is extremely entertaining to take a look at. With the, I want to say the invention, but with the ascension of the transfer portal, you have a lot of players who reach heights at their last destination, though they started elsewhere. And where that comes into play is the question of, can you claim that player once he leaves? The first time I really remember hearing it was Ohio State and LSU when it came to Joe Burrow. Then I remember seeing it with Alabama and Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts. I don't know if you really see that with Kyler Murray, though he did go to Oklahoma despite starting at Texas A&M. Well, one of the more relevant to our show is Travis Hunter. He went from Jackson State to Colorado. We all know this. And he weighs in on that debate by only talking about himself via a conversation with Cam Newton. And Cam Newton asked him, does Jackson State get to say that Heisman Trophy winner, that a Heisman Trophy winner went to Jackson State? Hunter's response was definitely. That's where I started off at. I wasn't in college yet. I had to go to college and find out. I went to Jackson State. This is not a old conversation. I know he won Heisman months ago, or probably like a month ago, to be honest. Excuse me. But this happened at Super Bowl week. He was talking to Cam Newton on the what's it called? He was on Radio Row essentially, and he was talking to Cam Newton. And this was just interesting to me because, like I said, this is one of my favorite debates. I typically land on the side of no. The old school cannot claim what you did after. Can I say a Heisman Trophy winner went to Jackson State? Can I say a Heisman Trophy winner went to Ohio State? I can say that, but I don't necessarily know if you can claim that player. A lot of times it depends. What did he do at that school? How long was he at that school? I kind of feel like the marriage of both needs to be there. You take a guy like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was at Ohio State for years. But Joe Burrow didn't play at Ohio State. He didn't do anything. All of his time on the field was seen in the purple and gold. It was at LSU. So, no, I don't necessarily feel like Ohio State has a legit claim to Joe Burrow's Heisman or to say anything about him in relation to them and his Heisman season. But you take a Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts was at Alabama for a while. He had success at Alabama. He was a quality player and a noteworthy player at the University of Alabama. But then he goes to Oklahoma and he wins the Heisman. Do I feel like Alabama can claim that Heisman? I don't know. I'm a little bit more on the fence. I'm a little bit more willing to allow it. But in general, if I was someone who went to Alabama, I don't think I would claim that. Now you get to a more specific example of Travis Hunter, Jackson State, and University of Colorado. Does Jackson State get to claim that Heisman? Because there's a big difference between claiming the player and then claiming the award. To me, the award applies to the season. That's how it applies to me. So if he wasn't at your school during that season, it's difficult for me to say we had a Heisman Trophy winner from Jackson State. I don't know. That's just me. Travis Hunter obviously feels different. So I'm not about to sit here and tell Jackson State they can't claim it. That'll be ignorant because who has more power in this? I didn't go to Jackson State. I didn't go to Colorado. I don't know Travis Hunter, and I'm not Travis Hunter. So who am I to tell a Jackson State fan that he can't claim or she can't claim Travis Hunter's Heisman when Travis Hunter was asked? Does Jackson State get to say that a Heisman Trophy winner went to Jackson State? And his answer was definitely. It was a strong yes. I think I'm willing to accept it because he had a high level of success. I think for everything he did at Jackson State by merely committing, it was a historic moment. So I think when you put it all in there, he's forever tied to the university. And adding his Heisman, it adds some things to the bragging rights, I guess. I just don't think I could do it. But Hunter was also asked about the decision to choose Jackson State. And this is what he said about why he chose there. He says, so I'm looking at it from that standpoint, like if I go here, I open up more doors. My name is always going to be there. He went to an HBCU first. So definitely I wanted to open up those doors. And I do think that is what will be remembered. I do believe that is how it will be remembered. That the number one, I know they changed it from 1 to 2. It seemed like right when he committed to JSU, you had to change it to number 2. But I'm gonna say 1 because when I was introduced to Travis Hunter, he was the number 1 recruit in the nation. I'm just gonna tell you the truth. That's how I was introduced to him. I feel like it'll always be remembered and etched in college football history that HBCUs, specifically Jackson State, but they lump it all together. I hate when they do that. But Jackson, let me not participate in that same thing. I hate Jackson State was able to pull in the number 1 recruit in the country. They did this with Deion Sanders at the helm, and that was a huge part about it because at the end of the day, that was his idol. But I think because of that tie, that history, the fact that it's etched in stone. You can take anybody else on that Jackson State roster, and yes, I mean anybody else on that Jackson State roster, they can be erased. Right? Like I wouldn't erase Shedeur. There's many players in there I would not erase. But when you're talking about Travis Hunter, that is a literal historic moment that nobody can take away. No one can erase that. This is a top 1 or 2 player in the country that went to an HBCU in the 2000s, man. Like that is a historic moment for college football. It's a historic moment for HBCUs. So I do believe that with the historic tie, you'll never erase his name. And apparently you can't erase Heisman away from Jackson State either. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Y'all know where I land on it because I just said it. But in general, that's pretty cool to Travis Hunter to include that. I wasn't looking for it, but I thought it was dope and I wanted to share that with you. So hopefully you felt the same way. As he pushed forward, Southern knocked off Alabama A&M. There's a top quartet in SWAC women's basketball, and this was a highly impactful game to understanding the first half of the season. Let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. And after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little bit of TLC. You didn't have everybody at the house. Maybe you want to switch it up. You say, you know what? Next year, we're going to have different furniture. Next year, we're going to have different seats at the I want to call it ottoman so bad, but in the counter, the kitchen counter, right? Like maybe you want to say all of those things. So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start off the new year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. See, I'm currently looking for a little bit of furniture myself. Wayfair is the place that I need to go for the best quality and best experience. There's something for every style, every home, no matter your space or budget. So you want to give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair? Then all you have to do is head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way, or excuse me, for your second listen of the day. Make sure you're checking out Locked on today. Man, that Super Bowl is not over. It is not over. We're still talking about it, and I'm sure you can catch that on Locked on today as well. Now, I want to continue pushing forward. Southern Jaguars women's basketball knocks off Alabama A&M, and I was interested to see how this game transpired because this is deeper than just two teams playing in the middle of February. This isn't that. This has the feel of a playoff game. This has a feel of a tournament game. You ever watch a regular season matchup and you just feel like you're watching playoff football? Because you got to remember, I'm a football guy, so I have to give the analogy to that. But have you ever watched a game and just felt like this is a postseason matchup and we're lucky enough to watch it in the regular season? A lot of times that means you feel like you're going to see that team face off against each other later in the or when the postseason rolls around. But for this, I don't know if we see Southern versus Alabama A&M because tournament aspects is a lot of things that come into play. But this feels like the stakes are high at all moments. That's what it felt like. And Southern ended up coming out with the victory, and this completes the cycle that the top quartet of SWAC women's basketball has had to complete, because you had Jackson State, Southern, Alabama A&M, and sitting at the top undefeated, my alma mater, TS. You. All right. But here's the deal. Even though TSU sits there undefeated at the top of the conference, this feels like the most competitive, how you phrase it, gender conference combination. I don't know how to say it any other way, but SWAC women's basketball feels more competitive than everybody else because that top four feels so tight. You know, like you look at MEAC women's basketball, everybody's chasing Norfolk. Everybody's chasing Norfolk State. Like that, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're number 2, number 3, number 7. You are chasing the Spartans. There's a clear top dog there for everybody to see, and they may be the best in all of women's basketball. Then you have on the MEAC men's basketball side, it feels like it's Norfolk again. And I know they have a loss, but it don't feel the same. Howard being number 2 and going on a 5-game losing streak, I believe. It's like, that top part don't feel too competitive. It just feels like Norfolk State's there. And maybe Howard ends up getting it together. Who knows? But then you look at SWAC men's basketball. Howard is undefeated, or excuse me, Southern is undefeated, just like TSU is on the women's side. But TSU men's side just lost 2 games in a row. And it just feels like Southern is primed to stretch the lead. And I think between SWAC men's and women's basketball, the difference is how we look at the top team. TSU has been a dog. Oh my God. Though it's not too far removed from feeling like Southern should have got them. Right. So as great as TSU has been, maybe they're 9-1. That's still a great year. Like they're still playing phenomenally at this time. But it just feels like everybody's tight. Because you look at that top 4, and outside of a Southern upset via Alcorn, the only teams who have beat the top 4 are the teams within the top 4. So with that being the case, I wanted to see Southern versus Alabama A&M. This was a matchup to me that was going to decide that 4th spot in the quartet. Who's going to be the last good team, right? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but if you're talking about a group at the top, who's going to be the last one of the really top-notch squads who, when they get to the tournament, we feel like could win it all? It ends up being Alabama A&M. So this wasn't just 4th place in the standings. This was about a little bit more as far as conversation goes, and that's my job. So Alabama A&M, I still think, is a really quality team. I still like what Dawn Thornton is doing with the team. Alicia Wilson had 15.17 rebounds, so this is a big game by her. But I want to break down her performance, unfortunately, and pick a couple of holes in it, because I think the timing of her scoring illustrates what happened with Alabama A&M against Southern, because there was basically the same type of, we're going to have a top scorer and a little bit of help, but no one else scores in double digits outside of our top 1. For Alabama A&M, That was Alicia Wilson with 15 points to 17 rebounds, of course. But then for Southern, it was Anaya Gourdine who had 20 points. In the timing in which she had her 20 versus the timing in which Wilson had her 15, drastically different. So the difference in this game was the third quarter. That's when everything shifted because Alabama A&M had a lead this whole game up until that point. They were winning the entire game, and then you get to the third quarter, and Southern takes the lead, and they build up a little bit of a cushion, not a lot of cushion, but enough for Alabama A&M to come charging back, but do nothing with it. Right. So it's like if I'm up by 10 and you end up charging back and now you get up by 1, I just got to hope that I can weather your storm. I just got to hope that my slump doesn't last too long. And that's kind of how I looked at it with Alabama A&M and Southern, where Southern was up, I think, 8 points. And then Alabama A&M ends up coming back and getting a 1-point lead. But then Southern just was able to put their foot back on the gas. And it's just a different thing. See, if I go on an 8-0 run and we were tied before that, then you're up 8 or I'm up 8. But if I go on an 8-0 run and I was up 6 or you was up 6, now I just have a minor lead. You know, it's great to close the gap, but it does not give me cushion. So that's just kind of how I looked at it, right? But anyway, let's get straight to the third quarter. So in the third quarter, Southern shot 63% in the third quarter. They didn't shoot above 45 in any other quarter. Not any other quarter. They shoot above 40, 45% from the field. Alabama A&M in the third quarter shot 18%. They didn't shoot any worse than 33. And I know that's not great, but still, you look at the comparison of 18 to 33%, it's a drastic difference there. It is a drastic difference there. So you have one team's best quarter versus another team's worst quarter. Alabama A&M put up 6 points in the third quarter. Southern put up 17. So in a game between two top dogs in the conference, if you had to look for the turning point, if you had to look to see what changed so much, you would have to point the finger at the third quarter. That right after halftime aspect or timeline, that was everything. Alicia Wilson scored 4 points in the third quarter. I think she scored 1 in the fourth, a free throw. That's not enough when you compare it to Gourdine, who had 8 points in the third quarter, had 8 points in the fourth quarter. She scored 20 in total. Gourdine had nearly half of her points in the third quarter alone, nearly half of the team's third quarter points as well. They scored 17, and she was 8 of them. That's when you want somebody to put you on the back. Anaya Gourdine, in the third and fourth quarter, when Southern needed to make a comeback and then also put the game away, she dropped 8 points in each individual quarter. That's 16 of her 20 points coming in the second half. If we're talking about big-time games, you have to make big-time plays and big-time moments. Everybody's heard that cliche, but it's usually said before the game. We don't acknowledge it when it happens sometimes. This was that. Everybody has heard that cliche. Anaya Gourdine put the team or took the onus of scoring on her back and She took the onus of scoring and put it on her back and told the team, I'm going to take us to victory. And that's exactly what happened. 4 points in the first half, 16 in the second half. We all know second half scoring is taken a little bit differently. It's more valuable for a reason because of this right here. 15 and 20 isn't that much of a difference, but 16 and 5 is. Now, as we push forward and wrap up, Stanley Connor. He's moving over from Miles College to Lane College, and he's going to be a head coach for the second time. Let's break this down as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Stanley Connor is a guy whose path was not always supposed to lead back to being a head coach. He was at Miles College for almost a decade, positional coach, assistant coach. But I'll tell you what, He was held over from the Reginald Ruffin regime into the Sam Shade regime. Did he follow Shade to Alabama A&M? No. But him and Shade ended up going the same route, the head coaching route. The reason I was a little bit, I started this by saying it was supposed to lead to being a head coach, because those type of coaches who are held over, they're held in high regime and high esteem, excuse me. When you have a coach who is on the coaching staff and he makes it through two different head coaches, clearly the second guy said, what you're doing is valuable. And when he's an assistant coach, that even exemplifies, it exemplifies where the coach views that assistant. Good leader, good mind, good leadership, or not leadership, but good leader, good mind, good advice, right? So I meant leader to the players, then I meant good mind as far as football goes, and then leadership as far as advice and mentorship to a coach, right? Like that's the way that I look at it. Basically, you're a valuable asset. Those type of guys you would lean and say could be a head coach, but when you've done it before, it's not always easy to go from being a head coach to being an assistant and back to being a head coach. It's not always the route that people take. This has a nice even 50-50 split in my opinion. But Stanley Connor is now the head coach at Lane after being at Miles for 8 seasons, making it through Reginald Ruffin, making it through Sam Shade, and now he's going to have an era of his own, which he's been able to do before. He was a head coach at Benedict College from 2007 to 2011. That didn't go well. The only really good year he had was 2009. Outside of that, it was like, it wasn't really that good. You had multiple 2-win seasons at the beginning, at the end. You had a couple of years where you were 500 or near 500. But in that 2009 season, you went 8-3. So there was something there in at least that campaign. But it wasn't good. So when you go from having, I'm not going to say bombed out, but it wasn't positive. It wasn't a net positive. When you go there, a lot of times it's easy to say you'll never be a head coach again. So I'm happy for this. This makes me happy. And he said, I look forward to building a winning culture. There is value in being around people. I think it was on here yesterday or last week that I talked about Nemo Washington being around Mike Vrabel, being around Kevin Stefanski, and how I feel like these are impactful people to be around because they help you shape who you can be. They help you develop certain things at a young age. And I know that Stanley Connor is not at a young age, but I do believe that Connor has the opportunity at least. I believe that Connor has the opportunity at least to be a guy who ends up soaking up information from two guys who are really good coaches. And Sam Shade was a really good coach at Miles. Reginald Ruffin, historically good coach at Miles. And I think that he can take a little something from that. So we'll see. He had 3 SIAC championships, 2018, 2019, and obviously the last season in the year in the 2024 year. He also was able to help win a playoff game, which is something Miles had never done before. I think that you have to look at this as being a valuable asset and hope that it works out. First time didn't at Benedict, cool. Now he has Sam Shade, Reginald Ruffin on his resume. But yeah, I do think tomorrow we'll actually get into some more recruiting talk. I know we were supposed to, but then I seen the Travis Hunter news and I was like, let me switch that for my top topic. So tomorrow we will probably get into more recruiting information. Let me know if there's any school that you really want to see or any player that you really liked. Recruiting is not my specialty. That's not my expertise at all, but it is something that I understand is valuable. And I want to talk about it with some schools. The more I know you want to know about, the more I can research and give you information about what it is you want to hear. If not, I'm just going to be giving what I want to hear. And that's just certain schools and certain recruits. So anyway, in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, guys, I want to say this. I really do appreciate you. I really do appreciate you for checking this out all the time. I see the subscribers growing, right? Like I remember when I was celebrating being at 1,800. Now we're in the 4,000s, and I don't feel any differently about hitting these milestones. Sometimes people get more subscribers, more success, and it's like, okay, yeah, I just hit this, just check this. Nah, man, I still be in my house geeked up about the fact that we're getting a bigger family here. So thank you sincerely. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we can interact. I'll say it again on probably segment 1 or something of the sort. I'd say probably something of the sort. But yeah, Stanley Connor, Travis Hunter, and then also the Southern Jaguars. We'll see what happens. We'll be talking about Southern versus TSU either on tomorrow's episode or the day after, because they have a big time showdown on Thursday. Just a couple of things to look forward to. I want to give you guys more anticipation. So forgive me. I want to give you more gratitude and anticipation. So I wanted to do this at the end of the show. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.